Hi, and welcome to Unit 1, Lesson 4, Converting Decimals to Fractions and Mixed Numbers. But before we get into that, let's take a look at last night's homework. We had page 23 where we had to complete each section, fill in the blanks. So for the top part, hopefully you did a good job. There was a reference page, boys and girls, if you had flipped back to the previous page. I will ask you on page 21, there is a visual representation. There was actually a key right there for you. So please keep that in mind. Also, there are some fraction sections here that would be good for you to practice as far as understanding the values of these fractions to decimals. And we'll talk more about that as we go on in the unit. All right, so let's take a quick look at the answers. Please stop this video, take a look at your answers so you can check. Here's the top of page 23. And here was the puzzle page, the decimal challenge, the number line challenge. Notice that in here, okay, here are all the answers. So pause the video, check your homework. Notice in here, what did we do? We did label. What a good math student will do is they will label all of the parts in between. Now, you might say, well, Mrs. Spatola, how did you know all of these numbers were 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, okay, or 0 and 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, and so on. What you do, boys and girls, in order to label a number line, you have to count how many lines are in between, how many small lines are in between. This way you know how to actually number the number line. All right, so here are your answers. Pause the video, take a look, and let's move right on to today's lesson, Unit 1, Lesson 4, Converting Decimals to Fractions and Mixed Numbers. Okay, so right now we're going to be on the top of page 25. And if you take a look at the do now, we're going to focus on how you can convert decimals to fractions and mixed numbers. So with the do now, a do now, boys and girls, is something that you should do. It's a little bit of a warm-up when to start the lesson. So take a look. What do you notice about this? And by the way, sometimes some of these do now questions do appear on your unit quizzes and unit tests, so you better make sure you understand how to do them, okay? So what is the value of the underlying digit? We have this really big number. And if you recall, what was the strategy that we used to identify each of the periods, each of the groups? Okay, remember, one time my brother tripped. It says, what is the value of the underlying digit? Well, it's not asking me to write it in word form, so guess what I'm going to do? This is a great method if you need to identify the value of an underlying digit. So basically, all I'm going to do here is I see the 5. I'm going to bring down the 5, and then what I do for the rest of it is I just simply zero it out. I'm just going to make the rest of the digits underneath zeros, and that's cool. But now let's say there was a choice. That's what it looks like in number form, but let's say there was a choice and I say, holy cow, I need to know the actual, the actual place value here. So I know this is ones, thousands, millions, billions, trillions. So it would be 50 billion. So what is the value of the underlying digit? It's 50 billion. Number 2, explain why the statement on the right is true. You'll notice, boys and girls, that sometimes I will include here, sometimes there'll be a do now, sometimes it'll be blank, sometimes it'll just have a little message, but a lot of times I often have these little cartoons here. And if you take a look, we have 0 and 5/10, and notice they look like they're holding hands with a fraction bar. It's a little silly. Mrs. Spatola and Mrs. Gelderman get a little silly. You know that already if you're in class. It says, did you know we're related? Well, why would it say that? 5/10 and 1/2. How would we know? Whoops, a little technical difficulty here. I just bumped over my camera. How would you know that they are related? How are they related? So try to answer that question, and you can write down your answer in the video. And we know the statement on the right is true because fractions and decimals are related. So if we were to change that fraction into a decimal, sorry guys, I'm having a little trouble with this camera here. If we had to change a fraction into a decimal, okay, we would see that 5/10 is equal to 1/2. How do I know that? Well, if I write this decimal, 5/10, as a fraction, I could actually simplify that fraction. I have to look for a common denominator. Okay, so basically, what's the biggest number that goes into 5 and 10? Hopefully, this you remember some of this from previous years. I know that the biggest number that goes into 5 and 10 is 5. I divide the numerator and denominator by 5, and what do I wind up with? 5 divided by 5 is 1, 10 divided by 5 is 2, and there you have it. So I can see that 5/10 is equivalent or equal to 1/2. That's how I know they're related. Okay, let's scoot down. The first section here, converting decimals to fraction using place value. So the focus of the lesson today is actually converting decimals to fractions and mixed numbers, and this is pretty cool. In this particular lesson, there are directions here. You'll see there are directions here, and there are notes on how to exactly, I will always give you step by step how to change, how to follow the directions for everything that you're asked to do in math class, okay, in your workbook. So whether you're in class, whether you're remote or at home or absent, there will always be something here to hopefully help you. Now, when we see there is a direction bar here, I try to also give you a visual example so that you can see this here. Okay, so for converting decimals to fraction using place value, we use the place value of the last digit, okay, to write fractions with the denominator of 10, 100, 1,000, and so on. Then you simplify the fraction if possible. Well, in today's lesson, I'm not going to ask you to simplify. If you'd like to step up and take the challenge, go right ahead. But for today's lesson, very simply, I'd like to just focus on the place value. So for number 3 here, okay, so 1, 2, we're at the top. So for this example here, we're going to write the decimal number, okay? So it's 16. Then we draw the fraction bar. And how many places are there? There are 2, sorry about that. There are two digits, so 2 zeros, put a 1, and I am done. And I read that as 16/100ths. Okay, here, same thing. We're going to use the place value. It says 75/100ths. So what I can do simply is draw my fraction bar. I know that there are 2 places to the right of the decimal, 1, 2. So 2 zeros, I put a 1, and 75. This one here, I'm definitely going to ask you to simplify because this, I would put a star here. This is definitely one that you need to know. Okay, so for this one here, it's 75/100ths. Okay, what would be 75/100ths in simplest form? Well, I know the biggest number, and we think of money, we think of quarters, right? We can divide the numerator and denominator both by 25. So that gives us a total of 3/4. And start to get in the habit, you'll see a lot of the times in math, we box up our answers. Okay, next one, number 5. Okay, we would read that. I notice it's 737 thousandths. Okay, I could draw my fraction bar. How many places? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I put my 1, and I go ahead and I just put the number that's there on the top, and I am done. So it's pretty basic. Changing decimals to fractions and mixed numbers is a little bit easier than changing fractions to decimals, which we will look at tomorrow. Okay, so what you might want to do is pause this video and take a look at what the answers afterwards. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do this one for you. So make sure you pause the video so that you can give yourself a little opportunity to practice. Okay, and then this is 25/100ths. It's 25/100. Now, this is another one. I'm going to put a little star on this one. This is definitely one that you should memorize, okay? 25/100ths is equal to, well, I think of money. I divide each, the numerator and denominator, by 25. I wind up with 1/4. And if you think about it, what is 1/4 or 1/4? The value of 1/4 is 25 cents, okay? Next, another method here. Okay, I call this the See and Say, a little silly. There is a toy, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, it's called a See and Say, and it looks like this, and basically what you do is you pull the handle down, and it rotates, and there's lots of different categories, but one of the categories that I remember even as a kid, yes, they had this when I was a kid, except instead of the handle, it had a pull string. So, for example, if it's a picture of a cow, it'll say the cow goes moo, whatever. So, a little silly there, but we see and say, and what it does is it gives you the sound of what it looks like. Okay, so in this case here, if you read through the directions, it tells you, and you could read through these, again, pause this video, boys and girls, at any time you need to. You read the directions, and let's go down in here. We can see it and we say it. I say 6/10, so if I'm thinking in terms of 6/10, I know that 6/10 looks like that. Can I simplify? Yes, I can, but again, we're going to look at that in another lesson. Okay, now I have 1, 2, 3 places. How do I read that? I know that the first place is what? The tenths, hundredths, thousandths. Very important that you know decimal place value, and that's on a previous page in your workbook. You can take a look back if you need to. I would read this as 8 thousandths. So very simply, 8 thousandths, and I'm done. Okay, next one, 97 hundredths. I would definitely pause this video or stop this video for the time being. Try it on your own and then follow through. Okay, 97 hundredths would look like this. And then we have 4 hundredths, like that. And then lastly, we have 5 tenths, which would look like what? Like that. Now, when you see something like that right off the bat, a lot of times I'm not asking you to simplify yet, but when you see something such as 5 tenths, you should know automatically that that is equal to, if I divide by 5 over 5, I know that that is equivalent to what? 1/2, okay? All right, next, let's take a look. Converting decimals to mixed numbers. The only difference here is just the whole number. So for this, all you have to do is write the whole number first and then follow the steps for decimals to fractions above. So for example, this one here, and we read this as 6 and 75 hundredths. So it would be 6 and 75 100ths, okay? Same thing here, 4 and 100th, 4 and 1 100th. Okay, next thing, 9 and 16 hundredths. Again, please pause the video so that you can practice. Okay, me doing the work for you or showing you the answers is not going to help. Okay, next one here, how do you read that? 3 and 128 thousandths, 3 and 128 thousandths. Okay, again, here is another example. You might want to bubble this up. Now, boys and girls, keep in mind that tomorrow in class, if you are a hybrid student, we are going to check this to make sure that all your work is done. You don't just do the Google form, you have to also do all the work that we're doing here because this is what we're doing in class. And then for your homework, okay, so you're going to complete this on your own. Okay, so this page you can complete on your own. We'll go over it in class tomorrow. Okay, and then that's page 26. And then page 27 is actually the homework. Okay, page 27 is actually the homework, and you'll have time to get that done if you need to later in the day. And the vocabulary review, this again is on page 27. Please make sure that you know the meanings of all of these words. We will be definitely responsible for all of these words by the end of the unit. And that's it for today. So I hope you have a great day and try your best. And that's all we can ask. Have a good one. Bye now.